Welcome to your iconic image. If you want to take control of your image and be a power player in your space, then this is the show for you. Here we will arm you with tools and information to help you grow your brand on purpose. I'm your host, Marlana Semenza, photographer and visual strategist. Now let's dive into today's episode. Matthew Hunt is a serial entrepreneur, business-to-business sales and marketing expert, coach, and as the creator of several seven-figure businesses, he's just getting started. His company, Automation Wolf, is known for helping clients generate a full month of LinkedIn content in just 1 hour per week. Welcome, Matthew.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, you know that I create images for clients to use in their branding, but you're going to talk to us a little bit today about what to do with them.
Great.
So God, first of all, let me ask you this, because I know LinkedIn is your thing. Why do you think LinkedIn is so overlooked?
So I listen, I don't want to say that this is probably a terrible way to say it, but I guess it's for at a social media, it's probably the, ugly redheaded stepchild that nobody wants to pay attention to. However, if you're in B2B, it's really the greatest opportunity. In fact, anything that you care about, if you care about your career in any way, I think LinkedIn is a great opportunity, and it's even a greater opportunity due to timing. So a lot of times when you're in social media networks, it's all about catching the wave at the right time. So, for example, my first agency, I caught the wave around search engine optimization and search advertising in general. And so I started it way back. I started learning how to do it in 2007, and I started the agency in 2010. And I got to ride that wave for a good 4 or 5 years before it got a little more sophisticated. And then in 2014, I caught the Facebook one, right? So there was organic free traffic, and then there was the paid advertising, what was early and people are still figuring out the ads and cheaper. I got to ride that wave. And then in 2018, I discovered the LinkedIn one, and we're still going with the LinkedIn one. And so what's so great about LinkedIn is that LinkedIn is a social media network, just like any other social media network, except for it has a focus of being for professionals. But what's so magical about it right now is that they have, 700, 800 engaged users logging in, but only 1% of people post. So what that means organically is there's a huge amount of, eyeballs there, but not enough content inventory. And so if you just post on LinkedIn, you get a lot of reach. The challenge is with all the other social networks, they're so noisy now. It's very, very hard to get recognized organically unless you already are a celebrity or a micro celebrity or an influencer in some way, already have a following for people to pay attention to without having to pay to play. And so in the sense of free earned organic attention and eyeballs on what you do, LinkedIn is a great place to be right now.
And one of the things that I've learned about LinkedIn is that a lot of people may see your content, but not many people necessarily, you may not know that they've seen it. And I only say that because I have had people come to me weeks, months, whatever, after the fact and say, yes, I've been following you and love what you're posting and this and that. I would have never known because they don't like it. They don't comment on it. They don't do any of these things, but they're seeing it.
Yeah, they're secretly creeping it. Yeah. And you got to remember that the algorithms, they're not only looking at liking, commenting, or resharing the very obvious, explicit ways of showing that people are engaging with their content. They can also tell when someone has stopped the thumb scroll and they're sitting there based on dwell rate, how long they read your text post, or how they looked at your images, or how the PDF carousel worked, or videos. And this is why carousels are so effective, is because it forces the dwell rate to be longer. Someone has to swipe to the left to see all the different images. So for example, yourself, someone who's focused on, producing headshots, a really good strategy for you on LinkedIn is to create these image carousels where there's many examples of work that you've done, or even it could be a before and after, effect of Photoshop. It could be, all kinds of different stuff that you could do. But the point is it keeps them there longer, which then the algorithm rewards to show more of your content. But you're exactly right that people do not always tell you what they engage. And this is why when you're in B2B sales, what's so important, because the buying cycle is so long, and it's very, very hard to track the different touch points of your marketing, is that you got to ask three questions when people come in this area. And the first question is, how did you hear about us? Which is a pretty obvious one. And then mark it down in your CRM. So sometimes they'll say, I was referred, I saw your stuff in search on Google, or I think I clicked on an ad, or I watched your video on LinkedIn. All this is very important. You put a tag in your CRM. The second question you want to ask is, how long have you been aware of our brand? And a lot of times that's when you'll find out a little bit more about the buying cycle. It'll be like, well, I've been kind of like looking at your stuff for like the last 6 months or 12 months, or sometimes it's 18 and 36 months. I can't tell you how long a B2B buying cycle is. And it doesn't matter if you're doing professional headshots, right, for LinkedIn, or whether you have an agency that offers some sort of done for you service, or whether it's a B2B SaaS tool, or whether you're in recruiting. It really doesn't matter. You'd be really surprised on how long this buying journey can be for people. And the last question is, what are the things do you remember about engaging with us around? And this tells you what type of maybe content is working, or what kind of digital assets or lead magnets are working that you can also put another tag to. And this is the best way to track this stuff, is by talking to them, because what's really hard to do with B2B when you have a long buying cycle is tracking. Like everybody wants a dashboard and to automate it through Google Analytics or Orbi or whatever your preferred tool is, but it's almost impossible to do because people go from browser to browser, from social media to social media. They have their own journey. They bounce all around, and it's very, very hard to connect all the dots. It's easier if you have a low ticket price item that's B2C, and you can create some sort of advertising and people click and buy, or in a very short window of under 90 days, then this kind of tracking works really well. However, all the analytic tools kind of cap out after 90 days. Like if their look back window no longer shows you what was that journey. And so it's very, very difficult to know what's working with it and it's not working. And this is why you got to train your salespeople, or you got to exercise those three questions when someone comes into your sales pipeline, and make sure you mark down tags of those things in your CRM. So then you can draw over at the end of the year, or at the end of 2 years, you can run a report based on tag to sales. And then you can really see what activities are actually working really well.
Interesting. What are your thoughts on what content on LinkedIn should look like as opposed to content on, let's say, Facebook or Instagram?
Well, it's very similar at the end of the day. Like the structure and the framework that you follow should be the same for all networks. And the reason being is you want to make your life easy. However, you need to recognize that each platform is a little bit different on what they reward and what they lean into, as well as the community or the culture that is on that network wants to receive. So, all the networks have a few different places that you can live. All of them have a news feed, right? Which is usually where people log into the network to consume their information. Very rarely do they go to a different section of the social media platform. However, some platforms have a couple things that are important. So LinkedIn, one thing organically that you want to lean into besides the news feed for your personal profile, okay, not your company profile. Nobody goes to your company page on Facebook, right? Is the only other thing that they really need to is groups or communities, right? So subgroups of communities are active, and that shows up in the news feed as well too. So those are 2 places you want to live. When it comes to Instagram is really today's magazine. And so obviously you want to keep things very photo centric at the end of the day. However, they offer all the other platforms, including, video, but it needs to be very, very, very snackable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Facebook's going to be very snackable as well too. People go there to procrastinate or to discover, to treat it like today's magazines. They're just kind of getting updates on their friends, family, and other things that they're interested in a scrolling news form format. Then when you look at LinkedIn, it's a very similar thing, except for there's no other place for you to kind of like live. Again, it's going to be snackable content. They even know that it's snackable content. Like a video is capped at 10 minutes. And if you look at Instagram, a video is capped pretty much at 60 seconds. Like you can't publish it unless you do the the Instagram television version that gets you a little longer, but this shows you they know that people are there for snackable content. Now, if you get to other social media networks, okay, so things like maybe YouTube or a version of podcasting like this, you could have your own podcast within the podcasting ecosystem, like Apple Podcasts is still sort of a social network at the end of the day, not exactly the same way, not quite as social as YouTube, but something like Clubhouse has sort of bridged that gap as the other one. And this is the long form content, in which case people are ready to consume longer form content. And what you have to remember is you just have to remember where you are. So is it long form content or short form content? And just remember that the world in general is addicted to short form, clickbaity content. That's the hook that gets them, right?
We have no attention span.
That's right. Well, they've literally published like statistics on this for a long time that our attention span is less than a goldfish. A goldfish attention span is 8 seconds, and apparently, ours is less than 8 seconds if it doesn't capture our interest. However, I think people secretly desire long form content, and the transformation takes place in the long form content. But the way you get them there is there has to be a journey, right? So you have to remember that the 1 minute video leads to the 2 minute video, and the 2 minute video leads to the 3 minute video, and the 5 and the 10, and then eventually they become a subscriber to your long form content. So just remember where you are on the journey, and the goal at the end of the day is, most of the time is if you're a stranger, they're just trying to like get to know you. And so stranger usually means danger. And so we have to warm them up, and we don't usually start consuming or buying from people until we know, like, and trust you. So they can't trust you if they don't like you, and they can't like you if they don't know you. So the first step is about being consistent. So know is consistency, and you can do that organically, or you can do it through paid ads, but it must be snackable. And so just showing up regularly in the news feed on social media networks, both through paid and or organic, is a great first step with snackable content for people to get to know you.
Let me ask you this real quick.
Yeah.
What do you consider regularly?
They should be seeing you at least once a day, every day.
Okay.
Where your brand comes up and it delights them in some way. And so I'll talk about how to delight people so they can get to know you in just a minute. So what's the type of content that you want to create? But all content, whether it's paid or organic, should always feel organic and natural. And so what I recommend is you follow something called the ACEs method, which just stands for authority, connect, engage, and show. Okay. Or some people will call it sell, but I prefer to show. So authority is like adding value. So it would be like, let's say we're doing this podcast right now, and I decide to explain the, ACEs method, and there'd be you and me side by side, right? Discussing this, and you could clip it into a 1 minute video. That'd be an authority post. It doesn't always have to be you who's providing the authority, but you must be associated with the authority. So don't always feel like you need to be the expert. Sometimes the best solution is actually being the talent scout, just like you're doing right now. Connect is the stuff that hits the heart, the gut, or the funny bone. And the best pieces actually hit all three at the same time. Engage is stuff where you go to your audience or to the community of whatever social media platform you're on, and you start a conversation or ask a question. A lot of times you can get people to create the content for you if you welcome them and invite them into participating. So this could be a poll. It could be a lot of different things that starts really interesting conversations. And a lot of times when you get a good enough conversation going, then you can also get a lot of attention on what it is that you do, and will breadcrumb back to where you're going. And then show is just simply showing the results. Like before and afters are the best ways of doing it. Before client met me, it was X results. After client met me, it's this result, right? It doesn't really matter what it is, but that's the best way of doing it. So I always tell people, don't tell other people that you're awesome. Instead, show. Show versus tell. And if you do that, that's a great snackable content. And if you mix that up between the different formats, because everybody likes to consume content a little different. Some love audio, some love video, some love text, some love images. You don't know how people like to consume it. Then you're going to hit all the right notes on the piano to play a very beautiful, snackable content song. It's just like on a piano. If you hit one key, it's gonna be a really boring song. But if you play all the keys, it's gonna be really a beautiful song. And so this is why you want to follow the ACEs method, and then you mix it up between the different types of content formats, from short video, right, to images, to carousels, to text posts. to audiograms, whatever it is, mix it up. Now, once you've done that, what's so great about this is a lot of times these social networks allow you, okay, to run advertising, and they can show you whether they've consumed your content or not. And so if someone's watched 25% or more of your video, well, you can remarket to them. And at which point, that's when you want to remarket to them the longer content, things that start getting into 5 minutes to 10 minutes. And once they start consuming 5-10 minutes, you can start making direct response type offers, which puts them into your long form content. Because this is where you're trying to do is indoctrinate them and educate them and create such demand around your brand that you don't have to do any selling later on and you can charge more. It creates positioning. And this is what's really called demand gen versus inbound marketing or outbound marketing. And this works much, much better, particularly for B2B businesses with long buying cycles that have high ticket prices. And that's what everybody wants. They ultimately, at the end of the day, they want something where, the system does all the selling so that by the time someone gets to you, they're pre-sold. So you and your team don't have to be good at sales or don't even need a sales team, and you can close sales at higher prices.
And listening to all that, all I could think was, wow, that's a lot of work.
Well, so absolutely, it is a ton of work if you go about doing it in the wrong way. So there's definitely an order to doing this type of work. And if you get it out of order, I find that in general, you set yourself up to fail. And so the order, here's the filter that in general you want to use is the filter is this, is how much effort do I need to put in versus how much impact does it provide? And the reality is most businesses or business founders or owners, especially when they're bootstrapped and they're starting out, their biggest problem is actually time. So even when people come into my sales pipeline for our done for you services, my number one question is, how much time do you have? How much time can I get of you every single month? And based on what they tell me is then going to dictate what is the right strategy and tactics to use for them, right? And really at the end of the day, this is where a lot of programs fail, is because they commit to programs that require too much of their time and it doesn't work. And this is why our service works so well, where we can create all your LinkedIn content or your social media content in 1.5 hours, right? So an hour to create it and 30 minutes to approve it or provide feedback each month. It's very successful. Most people can commit to 1.5 hours. And like magic, they end up creating all their content and they can stay consistent with it. It begins their journey, right? And so usually what I recommend is if you're in a B2B business is you start off with your personal branding and your social media organic traffic, because you have one flat cost and it keeps you consistent with your existing warm network. It's very simple. The next thing you would do, step 2, is you would take that same content and you would boost it with a little bit of paid media, because it requires none of your time and just a little bit more money. And it guarantees you visibility with either people who are visiting your website already or more of your ideal audience on the social media network so that they can get to know, like, and trust you. The third step is when you've conquered that, is for you to then start appearing on longer form content where you can tap into other people's audiences and other people's authority, because it's free, right? And you're only trading an hour of your time. So let's say you could show up on 2 to 4 podcasts as an example, or webinars or virtual summits, and you find these joint venture partnerships is a great option to do that. The next step is to create your own long form content channel, because it requires more time and effort. And the last one is to create sort of a community or a joint venture, or what they call a channel partners program, which requires quite a bit of effort. But basically what you're building at that point is an invisible sales force or an army of advocates that will help you do all the selling for you without the need or the expense of a sales team. So it gives
Never
you
heard that
massive
term.
leverage.
So tell me a little bit more about what that is.
So you'll see this is very common in the SaaS industry. So I'll give you an example, like let's say, or some of the companies that have done this very well is like Google AdWords or HubSpot. and they will partner with other agencies, right? And help them with the software, but also help them attract clients and support them in their business and growing their business. So like even at HubSpot, when it works with agencies, very rarely talks about actually HubSpot. They don't care about HubSpot, the agency. They don't care about the commission check even that they get from HubSpot. What they care about is the operations of their business. How do I manage my people? How do I attract talent? How do I grow my business? Are you going to send me leads? Will you feature me on your HubSpot blog or case study section, right? And so that's a channel partner program or a joint ventureship program, which requires a lot. So I have my own one as well too that's developing for other agencies where I help them with their operations, and I help them grow their team, and I give them SOP swipe files, which just stands for standard operating procedures that I know that they all need, in addition to my done for you services as an added value. And what ends up happening is it makes my services more sticky. They build more trust with me, and they send me more referrals, right? So this is like building your own little private sort of community, and it's really great because it gives me massive leverage because I can do one-to-many selling all the time. So I'll do a once a month coaching call, and in that coaching call, I could have anywhere from 6 to 25 people in that call. But even if they don't attend, they can watch the replay afterwards. It gives me another touch point to build more trust, to build more goodwill, which ultimately they feel in debt to me, that they end up sending me more referrals, right? It becomes another way of just generating business, but it does require effort and time. And so just remember, when we're looking at the filter of like, how much effort is this versus how much impact? And what we always want to do is work on the items that require the least amount of effort for us to begin with the maximum amount of impact. And that's how we make our decision tree when we're starting. As our business grows and gets more sophisticated and requires less time of the founder or owner, is the time where you can focus on other more interesting things like that, assuming that it's your unique ability or your superpower, you really love doing it. And if it isn't any one of those three things, you probably shouldn't be working on it.
Yeah. And just because I have to ask, what is your opinion on the importance of good photography with your posts, with your brand, all those kinds of things?
Yeah, it's great. So great photography is really important for any brand. I think the trick with great photography is for it not to look like it's photography. It's the number one thing. So today, like even in social media in general, when I test things, if I post a bunch of stuff that looks like you just had a bunch of professional headshots done, and it wasn't you celebrating that you got your professional headshots done, as you're right, it comes across as a bit corporate and a bit stale, and people don't really tend to engage with it. But if I take a photo with you and your kids and you're playing Lego, or you out on the boat with the family or some friends playing hooky for the day, wow, that stuff like does really, really, really well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I always tell people that a headshot is like a book title. It gives you an introduction, but that's all that it does. But the reason why we buy the book is always for the story. And so that's what good personal brand photography does. It tells a story.
I think that's an excellent way of putting it, is it tells a story. Now, I think that your initial headshot is important, that everybody needs one good professional headshot.
Right.
I have tested a lot of headshots. So if you actually want to test headshots, you can go to a website called Photo Feeler. And for like $20, you can find out what strangers think of your photos. And it's actually better to have strangers vote on your work versus people that you know. I know a lot of times people will get their headshots and then send it to their friends and family. But what you have to remember is they actually have preconceived ideas on who you are. They have their own lens on who they think you are. And therefore that changes what necessarily is your best headshot. And in general, there are some rules that I think that most great headshots are like, and every rule can be broken. Like, don't get me wrong. I've seen everyone do the exact opposite, and it's worked out.
Right.
But in general, I think that a good headshot, particularly for LinkedIn or B2B, is you're wearing some sort of semi-casual clothing to begin with. Okay. That's not too distracting, because generally speaking, it's going to be a profile photo anyways. It's just going to capture you. I am much more fond and seeing much better stuff when people are actually facing the camera head on, square, because it shows confidence, versus sometimes being on an angle, you get these angle shots. And what ends up happening is the body language, depending on how comfortable someone is, it can look like they're pulling away from the camera. And you just remember the body and the image, communicates a lot more about people in general than people realize, right? And so I find being square to the camera, it makes it really comfortable. One trick I do when I'm working on a photo shoot, which I'm not a professional photographer with people, is I generally actually get them to hold their hands up and open wide, because I know, almost like the Jesus, because it opens them up and puts their chest forward, and stand square to the camera with their head out just a little bit, because it removes the nice little double chin that we all get sometimes. And we're looking for a nice little smile. And usually the smile and the authentic thing that comes from that is always going to be based on the photographer you're working with, because nobody can force a smile. It's captured.
Right.
And a good photographer, the really good headshot photographers, it has nothing to do all the time with the actual photography. Yes, lighting is important in the camera, but let's face it, today with Photoshop and the technology that is there, a lot of people can take a really good photo today. But what you can't duplicate is the soft skills and the ability to make someone feel really comfortable, because getting your photo taken in a photo shoot, for most people, 99.9% of people, unless you're a professional model and love it, is awkward as hell and not comfortable. And so the trick is the person you're working with, the person who makes it intimate and makes it fun and relaxes you, is the one who's going to get the usually the best shot.
Right.
Now, that being said, I've seen everything different. I've seen people looking off in the distance, everything else. But generally speaking, you want to look down the barrel of the camera, because the eyes are the window to the soul. People want to see it. They want to see a nice, soft smile. Even if you got crooked teeth, don't worry about that stuff, or there's something wrong with it. It is who you are. Like, I also recommend not photoshopping out really anything, unless it's something that isn't like normally there. Like if you had if you had a pimple and it was a bad pimple day, show up to your photo shoot, because that's really easy to get rid of today. And a good photographer wouldn't keep the pimple because it's not there. But if you had a beauty mark and it's you shouldn't be, or you shouldn't be adjusting your nose size. Like, my nose is big, it is my nose, but when I meet you, I don't want to feel like I've been catfished, right? And we also don't want to use photos from 20 years ago, when you've changed, right? Whether you gain weight, lost weight, aged, gray hair, white hair, dyed your hair something different, you got to keep it current. Or if you change your look, sometimes there's men who, in the winters, like me, I like to grow a beard. In the summers, I tend to be clean shaven because the beard bothers me and I don't want to have tan lines on my beard if I decide to take it off. So, also think about different times or seasonality on how you might look different, and you might have different headshots for different reasons, and put that one up on how you would look today.
I think women generally need to update their images more often than men. We tend to change our appearance a little more quickly than a lot of men do. I also, getting back to your Photoshop comment, I will only correct what was my mistake. So, for example, if it was something that I did in posing, or if I did in, that wasn't something that I could have taken a better image, then I may correct it. Other than that, the only things that I will correct are things like pimples. And I agree with you about head on to camera for men. And the only reason I say it is because of exactly what you say that portrays, where we as women, we still want to be powerful, but we want to be powerful in our own way, not powerful like men. So, but now, how often do you think images should be updated and we should have new content?
So often, like regularly, really, I would look at your social media content and your photos as like journaling, like an image journaling, especially Instagram, right? But in general, like, it should tell a story and arc of what you did. And so I think you should always be documenting. And so I think some of it you can do yourself.
Agreed.
With the assistance of a photographer, maybe, who would help you do some of the editing. And then some of it, I think, should be a scheduled reoccurring session that you invest in. And I would say at a minimum, I think once a year you should go out and capture photos for you and your team with a professional photo photographer.
Mhm.
If you can, it depends on, like, so at my second agency, we actually had someone full-time, like full-time videographer, full-time photographer. Like literally that's all they did was document things around the office and things that were happening, to keep things, like that was a full-time job for them. It was awesome. It was like awesome. It was great having that too, that ability, but that's not always possible for everyone. And then even if you can't do that, I would say at least one session of professional headshots. And then, today's iPhones and things like that, you can do some pretty awesome stuff of documenting things. And there's cool courses and different angles and things that you can learn if you want to get really creative with it. But they definitely should be photos of you and your company and your brand and your life. They certainly shouldn't ever be stock photography or
Agreed.
things that you're buying anywhere else, is what I recommend. And it sounds like as well too, when we talked last time, that you even had some new interesting ways of being able to take photos through Zoom with people's iPhones and coach them through the process of getting
Hmm.
that done, which is also like probably very helpful. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or if it's creating stress for you, I think investing in having a professional help you through that process is great. But the most important thing is that it's a scheduled, budgeted thing on a line item that you take care of, especially today, where everybody is building their own personal media channel, right? Whether you know it or
Mm-hmm.
not, you are. And so if you think of like a magazine or any kind of media site, they always have photographers, whether it's a newspaper, a magazine, a television thing. And so this is a part of an extension of your team at the end of the day, that you should have someone standing by, available to capture this type of work and help you capture that content.
Just like I think you should absolutely have someone on your team to put all these things in place if you do not have the time or inclination or talent
Totally.
to do it.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, if it's not your core competency, you really should be outsourcing it and contracting it out. Not only does it feel great to just have things magically done, like it gives you momentum. And sometimes it might feel like it's expensive, but it's the cost of missed opportunity. Like if you don't do it, you know, how are you going to get to the next level, the next step,
Right. And I'm
and
also a big believer that if you're not willing to invest in yourself, how do you convince other people to invest in you?
totally. Absolutely. You got to lead by example as well, too. Yeah. Yeah. And we all need those consultants, partners, extensions, coaches. And there's never just one. Even in, if you just take the sports analogy, there's so many people that are involved to build a successful sports team, which is what most companies are, really, is they should treat themselves like a sports team. And even individual people like coaches and consultants who work on their own, you don't have an individual athlete with just one coach, one
Hmm.
person, right? One
Right.
extension. They've got so many different people in their team helping them, or an individual artist as well too. Same thing, right? So
Right. So, anything that you want to leave people with, as far as if they take nothing else out of this, they need to get this point.
I think that if so, I would imagine, since you work with a lot of professionals, I assume most of the people who invest in this are probably more entrepreneurs or consultants, and so I would say that, look, you know building a business or a B2B business is hard. It's not easy at all. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And probably cut yourself some slack if things are not going as planned or as you want. And don't look at it as like you're winning or losing. Look at it as you're winning or you're learning. And to be honest with you, the learning part is actually the most exciting stuff, because I've had a couple occasions at the arrival state, and then it's like, okay, and now what, right? So
Mm,
arriving is really like not that much fun. And so the fun part is the journey. Sit back and enjoy it. Also remember, don't forget to hug your kids, and remember why you're working so hard, and spend some time with some loved ones, because most of the stuff that we're getting obsessed about doesn't really matter. That's what I would want to leave with people with. Just doesn't matter. It's not important.
Love it. So with that, Matthew, I only have 4 final questions for you. First
Okay.
one, what's the best piece of advice you were ever given?
It was from a high school teacher of mine who said, Matt, you've got 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them accordingly. And so since then, I realized I do a little too much talking and I could spend a lot more time listening. And I would imagine that would be the case for most people. And don't listen just to wait for your turn to speak, like truly listen to understand.
Share with us one thing on your bucket list.
I'd love to do a big trek with my kids. Like, I don't, what, a week or two, on backpacks, some sort of trek, a memory that they'll have for the rest of their lives. Spending some time with their father would be great. I'd love to do many of them, but I would love to do a big trek like that.
When the toy companies finally get around to making an action figure of you, what 2 accessories will it come with?
Well, I always say to people this, I think that everybody should have never cheap out on buying really good shoes. So it will come with comfy, stylish shoes. And then I think you should never cheap out on having a really solid mattress, because sleep is really important. And so it'll come with a awesome, stylish, comfy mattress.
Love it. And last one, how do people find you?
Right now, you can find me at automationwolf.com. On the social media network that I am active on is LinkedIn. You can just type in Matthew Hunt at automationwolf.com, and it's spelled exactly the way you'd expect it to be spelled, automationwolf.com.
Love it. Thank you so much. And thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Once again, I'm Marlana Semenza, photographer and visual strategist. Please comment, like, or share this episode, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. For more information on how I can help you create your iconic image, visit marlanasemenza.com.